I am Homer the thief, and I have come to steal your graven images. Blah! Hi, I'm Torin, and welcome to Torin Loves the Simpsons. Today we're looking at Season 2, Episode 13, Homer vs. Lisa and the Eighth Commandment. An episode where Homer gets an illicit cable TV hookup. You know, cable TV from back when people actually watched TV. Yeah, one of those. Homer gets an illegal cable hookup for the house. Meanwhile, Lisa learns about the 10 Commandments in Sunday school and gets anxious about living in a house that's stealing cable, so she protests Homer into getting rid of the cable. Let's dive on in. We always start with the humor on this channel, and right off the bat, this episode hits us with a delightful little segment about our good friend, Homer the Thief. I particularly love Ezron, carver of graven images, casually discussing Homer the Thief's theft business, as Homer the Thief is actively trying to thiefify against Ezron, carver of graven images. This intro segment also serves the plot extremely well, so pretend I talked about it later on in the video, because I'm almost certainly going to forget to bring it back up. But while it's definitely not an S-tier moment, it's still one of my favorite scenes from the season. I also love moments like Marge telling Bart not to swear because he's not in Sunday school, and Homer mistaking spurious as a compliment. That one reminds me of Sherry and Terry ragging on Homer in Homer's Odyssey in Season 1, and it going right over Bart's head. And Burnsy's attempt to provide munchies is right on point for him. And the feud between Dredrick Tatum and his opponent over Tatum wanting to dedicate the match to his opponent's deceased manager is pretty solid. Also, this is Tatum's first appearance on the show, most certainly not his last. We're also starting to get some references to previous episodes. When Homer is browsing channels, we briefly hear the dialogue from the marged up version of Itchy and Scratchy from the episode Itchy and Scratchy and Marge earlier this season. In a previous review, I discussed my theory that different episodes of the show happen in different timelines to explain the lack of continuity between episodes, but it seems this episode is later on in the same timeline as Itchy and Scratchy and Marge. But not in the same timeline as 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish, based on the fact that Mr. Burns and Smithers don't recognize the Simpson house. I was about to propose that perhaps all of Season 2 is on the same timeline, and then I remembered about Mr. Burns, and now things are complicated. Anyways, in my last video, I criticized that episode for, among other things, being too plot-driven and leaving the humor behind. This episode is actually pretty plot-driven too, but manages to strike a much better balance between plot and humor. There isn't anything that's gonna get huge laughs out of me, but the episode is overall nice and lively and full of pretty good material, and it does a really nice job of supporting the plot so the plot can do its thing without feeling boring. I think that deserves an A for humor. As for the plot, well, would you look at that? I didn't forget to talk about the intro segment again. I done made a fool and a liar out of myself. But I think the intro segment does a fantastic job of setting the stage that this is an episode about 1, Homer stealing, and 2, Judeo-Christian morality. It's a little odd seeing Flanders visibly angry. Speaking of the timeline theory, this must be a different timeline than Season 8's Hurricane Nettie. But we are seeing him established as a very clean-cut figure when he refuses to get involved in the cable theft scheme. We're not quite at the Ned Flanders that everyone who counts loves, but I still love him. In the segment where Homer is sitting in church while Reverend Lovejoy is discussing something relevant to him, I am getting a bit of a similar vibe to the Telltale Head from Season 1, which is a pretty good association to have, so I don't mind that at all. That association is bolstered by the Sunday school scene, which in this episode is quite central to the plot. I greatly enjoy Bart's enthusiasm for hell, and on the drive home, it's so fitting of him to abuse his newfound power to say hell with impunity. Oh, and look, it's the first appearance of Homer's ass groove. Santa's little helper and Snowball too are even sleeping in it. That's cute. We get the first appearance of Troy McClure in this episode, and I find it quite fitting that they started off with the TV infomercial and partnership with Dr. Nick angle. It's kind of funny that both major Phil Hartman characters are introduced as having an unscrupulous partnership with Nick Riviera. And speaking of Dr. Nick, this is the first appearance of his classic catchphrase, "Hi, everybody." Hi, Dr. Nick. I like this episode's attention to background imagery. There are some just goofy bits, like people fighting in the background of the Homer the Thief scene, but the scene where Lisa goes off on Marge for grazing in the grocery store is juxtaposed nicely against Jimbo in the background actually shoplifting. They also seem to be pretty into the Jimbo shoplifting gag because it comes up a few times during the episode. It's hard to say how much this is an effect of the times having changed versus Springfield in this episode being portrayed as a smaller town and not particularly wealthy, but it seems so quaint that Homer having cable would be such a huge deal across town. It's kind of funny to see Reverend Lovejoy actually showing some dedication to his community and actually bothering to listen to Lisa's plight and offer advice. He's definitely not fully fleshed out yet. Season 8's In Marge We Trust, this is certainly not. This is also definitely a very different Lisa than even a couple seasons later, let alone the Lisa we see after her conversion to Buddhism in season 13's She of Little Faith. This is the Lisa who's worried about her own sake, about getting into heaven. She's not staging animal rights protests like in Season 4's Whacking Day, or pushing back against sexism and gender roles like in Season 5's Lisa vs. Malibu Stacy, or criticizing the role of police in society like in Season 6's The Springfield Connection. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly fine to also be focused on yourself, so I don't mean this as a criticism of Lisa, just a commentary that, at this point, she seems a bit more focused on herself compared to her focus on societal woes later on. Bart doesn't get to influence the plot a whole lot, but his lamentation that, "I wish I was an adult so I could break the rules," is a pretty biting commentary on Homer's hypocrisy. When Homer trying to throw Marge under the bus when the cops show up and he assumes it's a bust, that's pretty gross of him. On the flip side, Marge's support of Lisa and her protest, and her devotion to her moral stance, is wonderful. I gotta rate this thing now, though, and it's a pretty tricky one. It's pretty great, and I almost want to put it in S tier, but I don't think it's quite worthy, so let's go with A+ for plot. And now for the final rating. We have an A for humor and an A+ for plot, and for a plot-driven episode like this, that's an easy A+. Especially since that plot was even on the strong side of A+. This is one I've kind of been forgetting about lately. I remember absolutely loving the intro segment when I was younger, but the last few years, this one has kind of been falling under my radar, and I'm not sure why. It's a great episode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if you like the video, subscribe if you like my videos, ring the bell if you want to be notified about my videos, and comment your thoughts down below. I'm legally obligated to remind you of all that in every video, or YouTube will take all my corn. Anyways, up next we are looking at Principal Charming, so I will see you in that video.